Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Giving the Game Away. And today we're meeting Ishan, our head of programmatic. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you, Sam. Very good.
Nice. So we talk in this podcast, we have this series when we bring different members of the team. And we've talked a lot about the supply side, which is the publisher side. We haven't really touched on the demand side, programmatic side, which is also a big part of our unique selling proposition. So today I wanted to go a little bit more in details on that front, and just ask you a few questions, understand what you do, how programmatic works, and yeah, what the hell is programmatic, because it can be a bit of a black box for a lot of people. Ishan, do you want to tell us roughly what you do, and in simple words, how would you define programmatic and why is it used?
Yeah, absolutely. So programmatic advertising, how do you describe it? So as a whole, it sounds quite complicated, but all programmatic advertising means is it's just the automated delivery of advertising. So if you imagine the old legacy way of advertising would be that you kind of send a newspaper the clipping or whatever of your creative, and you'd send them a bulk of money, and that money would have to be spent, and everything would be very kind of archaic. It would always be a blank amount of money, with no control with the agency, with any kind of KPIs or anything. You're kind of just signing off a bit of money. So with the automated delivery of advertising, which is programmatic, it's basically using data that the DSP, which is a conversation for another day, but using that data to utilize to make sure that their ads end up in the right space. So over the internet, via in-app, and now over I guess CTV as well. And it just replaces the age-old way of advertising. It's just a more transparent, more targeted way of advertising, and it happens in milliseconds. So there is very, very clever technology behind it, but the actual, let's say, programmatic word is kind of overused.
Because I guess before programmatic, right, if you had like a website and you wanted to monetize it, you had to pick up the phone and find an advertiser and do a deal, and they would pay you up front, right? And what programmatic enables is just place a tag, and then the ad would be served to the right user at the right time. So it really enabled a lot of creators on the web, in-app, and now in gaming to monetize in a scalable way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, real-time bidding, which is what programmatic advertising is built off, came about in I think it was 2009, early 2010. Very, very clever professors made a lot of money somewhere by inventing it. But it basically means that someone can visit a web page. This web page then sends out signals to kind of a server. This server then has a similar thing with an advertiser. And then if the kind of KPIs of the advertiser match those of the web page, or let's say it's a sporting brand and a sporting publisher, then these kind of things can happen in around 100 milliseconds. And if you put that into perspective, 100 milliseconds is the third of a time of a human blink. So this thing is sending out a request and then receiving a response from the advertiser with the creative and everything intact, and serving within 100 milliseconds. Like it's crazy, and it's just much more efficient, and it's just the way everything's going.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do not realize that, when they load a website, say like Forbes.com or something, and you have all these ads, it really looks like it's part of the website itself. They don't realize that there's been requests made, and maybe hundreds of advertisers have been bidding to display that particular ad to you. So there's kind of this whole underground world of advertising that just people have no idea. They don't realize what's going on underneath. I always find that pretty amusing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when I explain to people, when they always ask what my job is, and I say I'm in programmatic advertising, and they say, what's that? And you say, it's that annoying advert that follows you around the internet. And it's because it's not actually done by people, say, behind a computer. There's no trader going, I want to buy that advert on the Daily Mail, let's say. They've got algorithms, they've got budgets, they've got certain KPIs and data points they need to match up. So that's what makes it more efficient, and make sure it ends up in the right place, and the money ends up in the right place, and makes it more reliable, transparent, and everything you kind of need behind the budget. So yeah, it's not all evil. I understand the evil aspects of it, but no, it's basically putting the advertiser's money where it needs to go and just making the whole process more efficient.
Yeah, and I mean, advertising is powering the free internet, right? That is true. It doesn't mean it's always done in the right way, but the reason why you can do all this stuff for free is because someone is paying for it somewhere, and most of these are brands. So that's obviously a net positive in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole thing's a trade-off, which people forget a lot of the time. So when people say this whole kind of privacy war that's going on at the moment with like Apple removing tracking and now it's come on, Mozilla have been doing it for a long time, and now Chrome saying they're going to do it from within a few years. It's kind of, people forget that it's a trade-off. It's not, the internet is not free. Servers cost money. Journalists cost money. Like even the basics of like say the cleaner in the office costs money. You need to be able to make money to be able to have these websites online, and that trade-off is the advertising that kind of gets it going. Or say you're watching your favorite YouTube video, that little sponsor at the start of it is probably what makes the money. If you actually calculate the money that they make from views on YouTube, it's minimal compared to the amount of money they get paid, because advertising is kind of the only thing that keeps these things going. So as long as it's relevant, as long as it's personalized, then it's kind of benefits all. And I think people forget that, as you've said, everything's a trade-off.
Yeah, like I always like to say, like this, people say like advertising is like the worst thing, but there's one thing that people hate more than advertising, and it's paying for things. And there's been this analysis done, like if Facebook didn't run ads or YouTube didn't run ads, it would be hundreds of dollars per person per year, and I wouldn't pay it for Facebook, for example. So you do get, as you said, it's a value exchange, and again, it doesn't mean that it's always done in the right way, but the system that enables free content, I think it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But there's loads of things that have been put in place since the birth of programmatic. So obviously when I first started my career in programmatic, it was the Wild West. It was kind of, there's no tracking, there's no frequency capping. There's, again, for frequency capping for someone that isn't in the industry, is for when you see an advert over and over again. So say the Olympics are on and you might see the same Nike advert all over London. That is fair enough because there's a big event happening. But if you would see the same pair of trainers that you'd put in your basket on JD Sport over and over again throughout the internet, it gets irritating. So there are frequency caps and things like that in place, ads.txt and other things that are probably for a more complicated discussion. But yeah, it's very much it's just the way advertising is going. It's just a way to make it more efficient and more, essentially all it is advertisers and brands need to make more bang for their buck. And how do they do that? It's by making it more targetable in the right places. They're improving the personalization, they're improving the formats, even to the fact of video. That video adverts were never really a thing. When programmatic first started, bear in mind there's obviously loads of signals that are going within, as we said, 100 milliseconds, and they're in the billions a day. Imagine the amount of data that would be if that file was a video compared to a like a banner. It's huge. So video programmatic only came about a few years ago compared to display, whereas video is a much more, I don't know, well, personally, I feel like it's a much nicer way to advertise in front of someone. It's like, as an example, say John Lewis spending millions and millions on their Christmas ad. It might not be to advertise their product. It's not even to advertise John Lewis. It's just something people on December the 1st, they go on YouTube and they Google.
Yeah, it's entertainment. Yeah.
Like that's what they do. Like it's a form of entertainment. Like, yeah, and it's just served programmatically. So
yeah, and so that's what happened, on the internet, in app. What makes Admix special is that we're bringing that inside the game, and that's really, we're the first one to do that. So what are the challenges that you've seen here, and the use cases on the programmatic side to make this work?
So is that specific to Admix or?
Yeah, for what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the whole thing. So the way to look at Admix, if you kind of haven't seen the industry before, is thinking of it as kind of virtual out of home, and out of home is the billboard that you walk past on the street. So the whole thing about programmatic, and as we were discussing before, it's very performance based. So it requires clicks and things like that to meet certain KPIs. But that billboard you walk past on the street doesn't pick up clicks. It doesn't know how many people have walked past it and things like that. So the industry isn't it hasn't quite adapted to this new environment or the in-play environment. However, the advertiser, I've never been in so many conversations with advertisers and brands where they've actually been excited about the product. Usually you go to agencies and you speak to them about, say, you work for other companies, and you try and sell in everything you have, and you can overlay data, and you can overlay other aspects that your company may have on top of others, be it, say, like financial times, where you know that your user base has a lot of money and a lot of knowledge into like economics and things like that. But this is a completely new environment. This is an untouched space. It's hitting consumers where imagine if you're playing a game and you're playing a football game, and the billboards were actual sports brands and they were ever changing. It makes the game look more realistic and just nicer to play. It makes it seem like more of a real environment. So I guess going back to the question where you said the difficulties of Admix, it's more that the industry hasn't yet caught up with the environment more than anything. So the interest is all there, but the things like viewability, which is kind of a stat about whether an ad has been seen on screen, and things like that, they haven't quite caught up yet. That's been the main challenge with everything. It's not the interest, it's not kind of the product at all. All we've done is we've repurposed the annoying ads you see on the side of your websites into a way that is pleasant and digestible for like the regular consumer as you're playing a game and things like that. So yeah, it's all it's a nicer way of advertising, essentially.
Yeah, I think one of the problem with gaming is like gaming never really had its native business model. You know, the interstitial ads or the rewarded ads were almost borrowed from traditional website, and then you put that on top of the game, interrupt the game. That's not really the way to do it. So what we're trying to do is really creating that native environment and trying to make it work programmatically. To come back to the topic of the podcast is the challenge, right? Because if it's just about inserting a video or an ad inside a game, that's kind of been done before. So what's obviously the big opportunity with programmatic is the data, right? It's data driven ad delivery. So how do you see that in gaming long term? What kind of opportunities do you think that gaming as a new environment will open for programmatic?
I mean, as we know, gaming is not a new environment. Gaming is just a new place to advertise in front of people who were already gaming. But the beautiful thing about gaming is that now everyone's gaming. It's not, I mean, it's the phrase that everyone's repeated a million times about the 14-year-old sat under their rock in their basement and whatever other metaphors you want to use. but like these yeah, it's just a way to advertise and hit these kind of consumers that would be advertised in front of, but without the blockers of, say, ad blocks and things like that. So yeah, it's a new environment, and I understand it's new to programmatic, but it's something that's being kind of picked up on. In the US, they're a million miles ahead of us in the UK, and it's the same in Asia and everywhere else. They've kind of always been on this assumption or conclusion that gamers are normal people. They are people that buy into the regular things. They are people that like advertisers. Like, I'm still wearing Nike trainers, but I play games. Like, it's just a normal thing to do. Yeah, sorry, Sam, I missed the question there.
No, that's all good. So when you look at gaming as an environment, currently most of the traded formats are pretty standard: banners, videos. As you know, we're working on potentially new formats as well. How far do you think we can take this programmatically? You think there's what could be the blockers, whether it's from a data perspective or tech perspective? Like, how do you see the programmatic evolution of ads inside games, basically?
Yeah, so I mean, the evolution of ads inside games, like as like we know we're kind of on the leading edge of it, and the first stage of that is obviously making them native to the game and not pop-ups as all other gaming advertisements are, which are intrusive to the user, destroy gameplay, add latency, like what every other thing you could say about them. Developing things like 3D ads, which I know that we're kind of on the cusp of. Imagine if you had Coca-Cola and Red Bull and Pepsi, and they're all competing for the same can as you walk into a bar on say your favorite game. Like that's completely the next step. And if you actually think about it in a data perspective, like there's a lot of data being passed around, and that's programmatic, but the actual weight of the data, or say like the megabytes, if you were to use that term, all it is just a wrap around a 3D object. So that's stage one. I mean, out of home was a huge step. Connected TV, that was a huge step. Who could have thought before that your TV advert that someone was paying £100,000 to be in the middle advert of EastEnders could now be competed with hundreds of thousands of buyers, all paying different amounts of money depending on what data they have like on you. It's honestly limitless. It's limitless. And as I've mentioned earlier, 3D advertising, or say if we were to have a mobile banner, which again for anyone else that's not in the business is the banner that appears on the bottom of your screen that might be irritating and you wouldn't necessarily take it in. If you were to then repurpose that as say a flag, and you were driving a car and there's this big flag above your head that has say Adidas or something like that on it, that's something that you're going to take in, and it's going to be, I mean, it's the balance of trying to have something that the user will see and they will take in and digest but not find annoying. And that's the balance of which Admix and Programmatic is trying to come to. Whereas previous to this kind of this in-play methodology, the only way to advertise in games was effectively pop-ups.
Interrupting.
Rewarded video was one stage, but it still almost forced you into it. Whereas this is making it more real world, let's say.
Yeah, I think it has great branding opportunities, of course, because the more and more I think of it as more of a sponsorship almost of the game, but a programmatic way to sponsor a game, rather than hardcore advertising and really pushing users into taking an immediate action. So I think that would just create great opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And even like going back to the data piece, as you said, there's certain data points that you can pick up, especially if you sit as Admix, where you're not necessarily at the end point where you're the publisher and you're only picking up from one game. If you're sitting as Admix, whereby you're a tech provider, but you are kind of sitting over the top of various different genres of games, you can pick up various different data points. It might be that this person's more of a risk taker rather. They might, I don't know, they might fight more things in games at higher levels than them. You might have other people that spend money in games, again, not ideal with advertising and morality reasons, but these kind of data points that you pick up that are what advertisers want to see, and do make the whole experience much more personalized and much more, I don't know, just make the whole thing feel more real. And I don't think people see the other side of it. People don't see the whole, if this were a non-personalized environment, say cookies left the world tomorrow and they were banned, they were made illegal, what would you going on the internet look like? Imagine the ads you'd see. They'd be, you don't know whether if you'd go on a football website and you just see football boots everywhere, you might just see things you never ever be interested in. So even though you're not giving your data to them, they're still personalizing the experience, let's say. So there's the balance again with data. It's kind of like you can pick up the data points and you can advertise against them, but as soon as you lose all data, then you lose all personalization. Then the whole experience becomes wild in my mind. I don't really understand. You need to find the balance in the middle.
Yeah. Great. So if we move out just a bit from Admix, just to talk more about the programmatic in general. So we've talked about the positive aspects and really that it help to democratize content creation and really help with the growth of the internet as a whole. What do you think are, obviously when you start to introduce middlemen or who centralize all these advertisers, all these publishers at the same place, weird things can happen, to put it in a, to put it mildly. So we know that there's, fraud, data, the way that the data is being handled and so on is can be sometimes a problem. So take us through some of the challenges that the programmatic industry as a whole is facing.
See, that's a tough question. So this is the point. We're at a very much an inflection point at the moment where it is that balance between the Wild West that it was, where they could take whatever data they wanted and use that to personalize the advertising, to now where we're giving kind of the controls or say, the remote control back to the consumer and saying, do you actually want to use this data for the advertising? So now we're trying to find, we being the programmatic industry, trying to find new ways of replicating the same performance that we were before. So without the use of cookies, there's things like cluster targeting and various other means, and that we're going to have to face. We might have to go back into contextual, which was how the whole programmatic advertising kind of thing started. So you might have, say, the Daily Mail sports section, and Nike would like to buy on that section, but nowhere else. We might end up going back into that kind of stage. There's also, bear in mind, there's a lot of things happening where you have CPI or CPA, which is cost per action or cost per install, or essentially cost per something that benefits the advertiser or the brand, let's say. Without cookies and without any kind of tracking between device to device, all of these attribution methods disappear. So where does the money go? Programmatic is still going to be here. Advertising is still going to be here. The money is still there. So the industry is at a point where we need to find a way of replicating the results, because the money is still there, without letting it fall into the hands of the big 3 or 4, which everyone knows. So it's a tipping point, let's say, but the money's not going anywhere. It's more or less just how we go about dealing with it, and how we having given the controls back to the consumer, how we then still replicate the same performance via other technology.
And so on the data front, we know that more and more there's, privacy is becoming at the forefront of all the decisions that these platforms are making. We know iOS is removing the IDFA, and there's the cookies are disappearing. Where you've talked a bit about that, but where do you think this will stop? Where do you think this is going, and also as a follow-up question, where is this coming from? Do you think that users genuinely care about this, or is it pushed by other interests that would somehow benefit from this?
It's not pushed by users. Whoever thinks that someone realized on their phone without other people telling them that they were picking up these data points. I realize how immoral that sounds, but there are big players in this industry. And so say the Googles, the YouTubes, the Amazons, the Facebooks, all of these guys, you have to bear in mind, they have login details. So if they remove all of these things that they're telling you is beneficial to you, even Apple, let's say, they're telling you to remove these details and remove this tracking possibilities, so that you're not then tracked, but you're logged in on their system. So they're allowed to still track you. So these guys they're doing everything they're doing to make their market share bigger. So there's no user-led kind of let's get out with the picket sign, remove the privacy, whatever.
I've never seen anyone do that.
People
want convenience, right? Clicking on all these pop-ups to navigate the content and what I want to share, it's just annoying after a while.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's almost the stage it's got to. It's where people say, what can I download to remove that consent, and just say yes every time. That shows the stage we're at. It's not like I understand people are downloading ad blockers because they do get annoying on these popular news websites that have just ads popping up everywhere. But that's not what this advertising should be about. And I think that's why everyone's kind of moving towards, or that's why video budget is kind of skyrocketed. But it's all driven by the big top few companies that kind of share. So if you think about if you bottleneck it, it's something like 20% of the total ad spend goes to every other player, and every other player is tens of thousands of companies, and then the other 80% goes to 4.
Yeah.
So what do you think's wrong there? It's like clearly, and who are the ones that are blocking privacy? Like, it's so blatantly obvious to me. But obviously, without being in the industry, and that with the documentary that came out the other day, The Social Dilemma, that's the first time people have actually seen what goes on with their data. But from that, the backlash you see is more of, okay, let's turn off this tracking, let's turn off this, let's turn off that. They don't realize Google still knows everything.
Yeah, it's much more deeply, the problem is much more deeply integrated. It's not just about sharing data. It's really disincentives of behaviors that that these platforms create. But yeah, so yeah, to finish off, what's your prediction then for the internet and the connected world post IDFA, and once all these changes have been done, are we going to have kind of a two internet almost, the logged in internet and the non-logged in internet, which would be a completely wild west with random ads and no tracking? And then would there be a divide? Like, how do you see that going?
I personally don't feel like there could be a divide. There could be for the super niche sites. So say or not niche, it's kind of like higher brow. So say your Guardians or Telegraphs or things like that, where people are going to go on every single day. They'll be able to sustainably have the login kind of method. But we're going to have to find another way. There's loads of identity solutions around. The problem is there's 10 identity solutions around, and they don't work together. So it's all about collaboration to make sure we can still function, and just working on the technology and making sure that everything can get back to the old ways, or the ways that we are now. So personally, I think there might be a couple years of this kind of experimental behavior, where you have some sites going into subscription models, you have some sites that have this Wild West nature, as you've just said. But all in all, we will find a solution. The end is not near. We will be
well, I like the positivity.
Yeah,
this is great. All right, well, Ishan, thank you so much. This was great, very instructive. I'm sure we have material to do a second and third podcast, because we just scratched the surface. But yeah, thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely, happy to be here. Thank you, Sam.
Thanks, everyone, and I will see you next week for another episode.